Thank you very much. Thank you. Very kind. I appreciate it. I want to thank Lou for his introduction and Lou and Judy for their longtime friendship and support to me and to Mary Pat, going back to even well before the days that I was United States Attorney, starting back in 2002. I am happy to be here and look forward to an exchange today between us on the issues that we care so much about, and that I think will help to define both the direction of my state over the next number of years and the direction of our country. One of the things that I appreciated the most about Lou's introduction was in listing the things that he thought I had become known for. He listed strong and decisive action. See, in the end, we all get known and characterized for how we speak. Maybe me more than some others. If you have a particular style, a particular approach to things, people get fascinated with that part of your approach. And that's fine. That's part of how you define someone. But for people in government and people who are intent on providing leadership to a state or to our country, it's strong and decisive action, or the lack thereof, that does define, ultimately, who you are and what kind of leader you are. Let me tell a few stories off the top to exemplify that. When I first became governor of New Jersey in January of 2010, I was told during the transition by my predecessor, John Corzine, that I usually pause for the laughter then, but I'm sorry. I just flew in here this morning and I'm off my game, so I apologize. We'll do it again, because I know you'll do it again too. I was told by my predecessor, John Corzine, all right, that the budget was balanced in the fiscal year that I was entering, and that I didn't need to worry about anything. I became a little suspicious in the week before my inauguration when we asked to come in and just examine the books for ourselves with my new state treasurer, when they refused to let us do it. They said they were very busy kind of closing things up. I'm sure they were. And I found out pretty quickly, because the second week as governor of New Jersey, the state treasurer came to me and said, we have a significant problem. If we don't cut $2 billion in current fiscal year spending, with 5 months left in the fiscal year, we will not make payroll for the second pay period in March. Now imagine that. New Jersey, which is the second wealthiest state in the union per capita, was not going to be able to make state payroll for the second pay period in March. So I had two choices. I had then and have now a Democratic legislature. And choice number one was to go down, sit with the leaders of the legislature, and try to negotiate with them a package that would bring balance to the current fiscal year budget. The second choice that was presented to me was that I could sit down, make the cuts in the budget, and because of the special constitutional powers that New Jersey's Constitution bestows upon the governor, that I could do that by executive order. Now, for those of you who have gotten to know me over the last 5 years, if you think I picked choice one, you need to leave now. You need to go. You can't keep up here with this conversation. I obviously picked number two. So I sat down and for 2 weeks went through with the state treasurer and members of my senior staff, line by line, every line in the budget. And we cut $2 billion with 5 months to go. Put it in an executive order, and then asked the legislature for the opportunity to give a joint session speech on the fiscal situation in the state. They said yes, and when I went to go to give the speech, they said, when do we get the advanced copy of the speech? And I said, you'll hear the speech when I give it. And they said, no, the tradition here is that we get an advanced copy of the speech. I said, I know, so you can leak it. And I would prefer to actually be the one who delivers my message rather than you. So I went out there without giving them any preview. And basically, the speech was probably about 35 minutes long. I'll just cut it down to like 20 seconds. It was like, you created this problem. We're $2 billion out of balance. I just signed an executive order alone in my office, cutting $2 billion out of the budget you just passed. I fixed your problem. You can thank me later. Have a good day. And I left. And I have to tell you that the reaction to the speech afterwards was fascinating. I left, and I probably should have just done that in the speech. You know, I wasted 34 minutes and 40 seconds, but all right, I should have just done that. But instead, when I left, I heard about the reaction afterwards from the folks in the legislature, especially the Democrats. They were calling me all kinds of names. Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte. You know, all those great leaders of the past I admire so much. And so the next day, I was coming into the State House through the back door, coincidentally at the same time as the Senate president, a guy named Steve Sweeney, still the Senate president, Democrat, head of the Iron Workers Local in New Jersey, a shy and retiring guy just like me. We walked into the room, right into the State House together, and I said, hey, Steve, you know, I saw the stuff you said about me in the newspaper, Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, and you know what? It really struck me. It struck me, and I've had second thoughts. And so now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rescind the executive order, and I'm going to send this problem down the hall, and you guys figure out where you want to cut the $2 billion from. And this will tell you everything you need to know about government anywhere. He looked at me and goes, hey, Governor, don't overreact, you know. All things considered, you know, it wasn't an awful speech. I mean, you know, it's just in the newspapers. Don't get crazy. I tell you that story not only because it's funny and not only because I like telling it, but because in the first 4 weeks of the administration, I had to set the tone for what my leadership was going to be. I'd never been in the state capitol before as an office holder of any kind. I was a prosecutor. They didn't know me except from the campaign, and they were testing me. And when you are tested, you have to show folks what you're made of. And you cannot leave any room for interpretation, because if you do, it will most likely be interpreted against you. Ronald Reagan understood this as president. When the air traffic controllers said they were going to go on strike, Ronald Reagan said, hey, the law says you cannot strike. And they said they were going to anyway. Ronald Reagan very clearly and directly said to them, if you strike and do not come back to work, I will fire every person who does. They didn't believe him. They called his bluff. He fired them, and he set a tone for the rest of his administration, which was, when I say something, I mean it. And I am willing to do difficult things that will be perceived differently by some, and maybe even poorly by some, but if I believe it in my heart and I believe it's what the people I lead need, then I'm going to do it without care or concern for the consequence. Now, if you ask me why America now is perceived around the world as weaker than we were 5 years ago, it is for that reason. We need to start with strong and decisive leadership at the top that understands that every signal you send as a leader is read and interpreted by everyone. Whether you're the governor of the state or the president of a country, all the people who watch you and rely upon you for leadership will read every sign and signal. The second reason why I believe our country is weaker today than it was 5 years ago is because we no longer have a government that people around the world want to emulate. For years and years, decade upon decade, the United States government, with all its flaws, was seen as being able to get things done, to move its economy, to move its freedom, to move its interests at home and around the world in an effective way. And now, we are not seen that way. The dysfunction in Washington, D.C. is no longer being emulated around the world. It is being mocked around the world. As a government that cannot get out of its own way because people will not come together to work together and will not stand for principles that they believe in a way that leads us to get things done and move the ball down the field. If we want to once again be the leader of the world, we need to have our government be one that people around the world, not other governments, but people around the world want to emulate, want to be like. Lastly, on this point, we cannot have a world where our friends are unsure of whether we'll be with them and our enemies are unsure of whether we will be against them. And today in this country, that is what's going on. In New Jersey, no one has to wonder whether I'm for them or against them. There's never really a cloud of indecision around what I say and what I do. I say we're for smaller, limited government. Those are good words that many, if not all in this room, would agree with. But what do you do about that? Well, discretionary spending in the state of New Jersey is $2.2 billion less today than it was in fiscal year 2008. That's cutting a budget and getting it in balance. You make government smaller by having less people in it. There are 6,000 fewer employees on the state payroll in New Jersey today than on the day I was sworn in January of 2010. That's the way you make government smaller. When you say that an education system is broken and it needs to be fixed, you don't just talk about it, you do what we did in New Jersey, which was for the first time in 105 years to reform teacher tenure to one principle. Good teachers get tenure and bad teachers lose their jobs. If you say that your state is in such awful fiscal condition that its pension system and its health benefit system is tens of billions of dollars in debt, you start to fix it by doing four things that just make common sense. You raise the retirement age. You eliminate cost of living adjustments. You increase the penalties for early retirement, and you increase the payments that employees have to make to the pension fund. Those four things are not splitting the atom, everybody. It's not like I came up with some genius idea. This is what we need to do. It's what we have done, and we did it with a Democrat legislature. Now, the way you do that is to get everybody in the room, identify the problem, have them tell you they won't fix it. And then you go out on the road and do town hall meetings, like I've done 116 since I've been governor, and you take your case to the people. And when you convince the people that that strong and decisive action is needed, even with 10,000 protesters on the front steps of the State House, the Democrats pass that bill, they send it to your desk, you sign it, and you save $120 billion in the pension system over the next 30 years for the taxpayers who otherwise would have had to foot the bill. That's strong and decisive action to deal with long-term fiscal issues. Lastly, before I take questions, let me just say this. This is the Republican Jewish coalition that I'm speaking to. And so I assume that as Republicans, you might be interested, once again, in winning elections. Right? I know I am. And see, I'm not in this business to have an academic conversation. I am not in this business to win the argument. I am in this business to win elections. And here's why. Because when we win elections, we get a chance to govern. And we get to mold and shape the future of our state or our country. When we lose, we don't. But worse yet, not only don't we, they do. They do. And when they do, they take our state and our country in a direction that is absolutely opposite of what we believe in our hearts is the direction our country needs to go in for our children and grandchildren to have a better future. So I'm chairman of the Republican Governors Association this year, and I'm proud that I was elected by my fellow governors who are making change all over this country in state capitals and getting things done in a way that Washington, D.C. can't even imagine. I'm proud to be chairman of that group of men and women, and here's what we stand for in 2014: winning. That's what we stand for. We stand for winning. So listen, you all know me. I have strong principles and things that I believe in, and I'm not shy to talk about them. But here's the thing. It's time for us to stop as a party worrying more about who wins the argument rather than who wins the election. It's time for us to stop as a party killing each other. It's time for us to get moving towards winning. I always thought that's what political parties were put in the business to do. If we want to have arguments about things that lead to nothing, we could just form a university. They serve a purpose, but not in our business. In our business, the only way we make change is to elect strong and decisive men and women who are willing to lead, to act, to decide. That will make our country stronger and better at home, which will permit us to play the role we must play around the world. Because when America does not play an active, vigorous role in the world, bad people do. And we cannot allow that to happen. So I'm thrilled to be with all of you again. I'm happy to have the opportunity to take your questions. And I'm very happy to call so many of you in this audience friends of mine and Mary Pat. I look out at this group, and there are a lot of you who have been with us. Were with us in 2009 when no one thought a Republican could win in New Jersey. Were with us in 2013 to help us set an extraordinary electoral record in a blue state, and continue to be with us now as we confront the issues and challenges of the future for all the Republican governors to make our state in New Jersey and our country a better place for our children and grandchildren's future. So thanks for giving me the time today. I'm happy to take questions. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. All right, Matt, what do we got?
All right, thank you, Governor. As has been the custom with your other speakers, I'm going to lob you a nice, fat, juicy softball to start. So,
it's great to be away from home.
So you mentioned the cornerstone of winning, and I think this is one of the things we all agree on. I think we all agree in this room that we face challenges as a party getting to a broader winning coalition. Talk a little bit about your vision and tactically and broadly how we transform us from being a Bing Crosby Republican Party to a Bruce Springsteen Republican Party.
Tougher than the rest. Someone just put the sign up. Well, here's the thing. The good thing about me being able to answer this question for you is I do not have to speak theoretically or hypothetically. I just did it. New Jersey is a blue state. How blue is New Jersey? I'll give you 3 quick examples. We have not elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 42 years. 42 years. We have 750,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. And Barack Obama won New Jersey by 18 points in 2012, one of only 3 states where he won by more in 2012 than he won in 2008. That's a blue state. So what do? For 4 years, what we said was, if we want to be successful politically in a state like that, we have to reach out to everyone. We cannot take the position that all we're going to do is Chamber of Commerce lunches. I love Chambers of Commerce lunches. I get great receptions there. They're wonderful folks. But guess what? They're probably all voting for me already anyway. I go to Chamber of Commerce lunches to two things: to say thank you and to assuage my own ego. That's it. So what we did was do town hall meetings in places like Irvington, New Jersey, where I got 4.7% of the vote in 2009. And after I got 4.7% of the vote, they called me divisive. I said, divisive? Are you kidding me? I brought 95% of the people of Irvington together. They all hated me. That's a unifier, everybody. We did town halls. We sat with groups. And here's what we did. We appeared and campaigned in places where we're uncomfortable. And when we went there the first time and the second time, you know what I did? I listened. I didn't talk. You see, folks, especially some folks in our minority communities, are not used to being listened to by our party. They're used to being talked to by our party. We need to listen more, understand that leadership can also come from listening, and the respect that comes from sitting at a table with someone and listening to them. Then we come back days and weeks later with our ideas about how to address the issues that they care about. I didn't change my policies. I just went and listened and then spoke and said who I was and what I believed in. When we agreed, that was great. And when we disagreed, they knew that too. Because believe me, no group in this country expects any politician to agree with them all the time. And if they hold us to that standard, let me tell you what politicians will do. They will lie to you. That's it. That's the simple truth. Because politicians are about winning. And if they believe that all you want to hear is what you want to hear, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. And they're going to come in here and strain muscles pandering. And I don't care whether it's in this room or any of the rooms that we're talking about in New Jersey. And what happened as a result? Last November, we got 61% of the vote. We won by 22 points, a 40-point turnaround from a year before when Barack Obama at the top of the ticket won by 18 points. We got 51% of the Hispanic vote. We won the Hispanic vote in New Jersey. And we got 21% of the African American vote, up from 7% in 2009. So the way we do this, Matt, as a party, is to go out to places where we are uncomfortable and to listen, and then to come back with our ideas and our principles to deal with the issues that each of those communities has identified as the most important to them. And I will tell you that in the Hispanic community in New Jersey, they care deeply about education reform, about the way we've expanded charter schools to a record number in the history of New Jersey under this administration, the way we're fighting for vouchers in our state because we believe that economic circumstances shouldn't determine whether you go to a good school or a bad one, that the choice of a parent should determine that. That's not a Hispanic issue. That's a New Jersey issue. That's an American issue. And we need to start addressing those things directly in these communities and not be afraid to go to those places and not be afraid to be booed every once in a while. We'll live. It'll be fine. But after you've been booed, when you come back 2 months later, any group, I don't care who it is, will start to listen. So that's the way we're going to do it as a party if we want to be a broader, more expansive national party. It's not about pandering. It's not about any particular issue. It is about how we present ourselves, how we carry ourselves, where we spend our time. Where you spend your time is the greatest indicator of respect. That's the greatest indicator. So that's the way I would do it if it were up to me.
Governor, let me just get this out right now so we can get on to some other stuff. Bridgegate, obviously a lot has been said, the reports come out. I don't want to get into the whole logistics of all that, and the questions that we've gotten don't focus on that. I think the bigger thing is, as a teachable moment, what's the biggest lesson? What have you taken away from this whole instance going forward?
Well, listen, first of all, it is as a leader of a large organization, as many of you in this room are, it is always confidence shaking and disappointing when people that you trust let you down. And what you realize as the leader of that organization is that you're ultimately responsible for that, no matter how it happened. And your job as a leader is to decide, how do you move forward from that? How do you get better? How do you make your people better? And so for me, I think it's about me being a lot more questioning about things that are going on, not to just trust based upon long-term relationships or past performance. And it's about sending very clear signals, as I said during the speech, to not only the people who you serve, but to the people who serve with you, that certain conduct and actions are acceptable and certain are completely unacceptable. And so I'm going to redouble my efforts to make sure that I send those signals, both directly and indirectly, but also to make sure that I understand that my obligation as a chief executive is to constantly question and to never be comfortable. And to the extent that you ever do become comfortable, you put yourself and the trust that people have given to you at risk. And that's the greatest problem that's come from all this. Is nothing I care about more than the trust of the people of New Jersey. And I will continue to work as hard as I can in reaction to this to make sure that folks understand that I am going to be responsible for all that happens on my watch, both what's happened before and what will happen going forward from here.
We were fortunate enough, Governor, to be a part of your trip to Israel recently. Can you share with us some of the reflections on that trip and sort of how you view some of the challenges from a foreign policy perspective facing that part of the world?
Well, sure. First of all, it's great to go to Israel when you're from New Jersey. Here's why. Because every time people in Israel come up to an American and want to describe the size of Israel, they say, it's about the same size as New Jersey. And so when you're governor of New Jersey and that happens, you're like, I know. One of the decisions I made on our trip to Israel, which was both diplomatic and economic, was that I wanted to bring my family. I didn't want to go over by myself with a group of business and religious and governmental leaders. I wanted my wife and my children with me. And we were fortunate enough to be able to plan it during Holy Week. And so we were there both during Passover and during Holy Thursday and Good Friday in my religion. One of the things that I think it shows to anybody who spends time there is that Israel is the only place that would ever permit what happens in Jerusalem, especially during Holy Week, every day, but especially during Holy Week. All of those faiths coming together freely and openly to being able to practice their faiths in the place where those faiths have their origin. I will tell you that to see it myself for the first time in person was overwhelming during that week in particular. Also, having my family there gave me the opportunity, my wife and I have sent and do send all 4 of our children to parochial school, to Catholic school. And when we were on the Mount of Olives and our tour guide was beginning to tell the story, my then 11-year-old son, Patrick, interrupted him and finished the story. And Mary Pat and I looked at each other and said, thank God it worked. It worked. He was paying attention. It actually has made a difference. I had the opportunity twice, both privately, Mary Pat and I, to have dinner with the Prime Minister and his wife, Sarah, and then also to have a business meeting with he and members of his government. I was extraordinarily taken by his strength and resolve under circumstances that none of us as governmental leaders in this country can even imagine. The constant feeling of threat and crisis, having to coexist with an economy that is exploding in a positive way. We got to see both of those because of our business contacts and our governmental contacts. On a personal level, again, I got to meet President Perez. And when he walked out to see me and said, "Governor, I've been looking forward to meeting you," I felt like he had walked out of a history book and couldn't possibly be talking to me. I took a helicopter ride from the occupied territories across and just felt personally how extraordinary that was to understand the military risk that Israel faces every day. The last thing that I concluded was a little bit about what I said earlier in the speech. All the people that I met in Israel, whether they were government figures, whether they were people at Yad Vashem who were so extraordinary to us in giving us an amazing tour of a breathtaking place, or whether it was folks that we met in local restaurants, they want America to be their unblinking, unwavering, unquestioning friend. And the sense I got from that trip was that many of those folks, not all of them, but many of them were worried that we were no longer being that. You cannot live under that type of threat every day and then also have to worry about whether your friends will stand up for you or not. And so I walked away with the sense that all of us in our country who believe that that's an important thing to be for, don't just need to be for it quietly, we need to be for it loudly so that our voices are heard. And I don't think that you can really experience that in any other way but being there. And so for me and Mary Pat and our children, it was an extraordinary personal experience, and for me as a leader, it was a very instructive governmental experience.
I've been in this job for 25 years. If I want to make it to 26, I have got to ask this question from Betty Sembler. So, given your background in law enforcement, what do you make of the current discussions about changing laws criminalizing marijuana? And do you think the GOP should apply a Big Ten approach and encourage decriminalization?
Oh, Lord. I just answered this.
I think you get the gist.
I answered this question at length at AEI. Betty and I had a really good back and forth on this one at AEI. Listen, let me be really clear. I don't favor legalization. I don't favor recreational use. I don't favor decriminalization. And I don't favor the use of marijuana as a medicine. Now, in my state, I was saddled with a law that was signed by Governor Corzine at 3 a.m. the morning that I was sworn in as governor to legalize medicinal marijuana in our state with no real direction or standards set in the law, the kind of law that you pass during lame duck session really quickly because you know the big bad wolf is coming to town and won't sign this on his watch. But I also took an oath on January 19th of 2010 that said that I had to enforce the laws of the state of New Jersey. That was one of them. And so what we have done is create the most narrow, most medically based medical marijuana program of any state that allows that in the country. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have it. But as I said to Betty a couple weeks ago at AEI, it's not up to me. I have a Democratic state legislature that just introduced a bill this week to legalize marijuana. So we're not on the same page on this one. And no bit of compromise is going to bring us to a point where the medical marijuana law is going to be rescinded. But what I will continue to do is to make sure that it is done in a way that is medically based and does not evolve into recreational use, decriminalization, or legalization. not during the time that I'm governor.
Betty says thank you.
As always, Betty.
Governor, you did surprisingly, well, not surprisingly well, but I mean, you did exceptionally well among Jewish voters last time and in your first election. You've proven yourself to be a great friend and a pro-Israel candidate. There are some that have raised questions, however, in their writings about your support or lack thereof on issues related to Sharia law. Can you respond to those that have been raising those issues?
Yeah. This is really perplexing to me, I have to tell you. This all comes from me appointing a Muslim man to the state court bench in New Jersey, a guy named Sohail Mohammed, who immigrated to this country as a child from India, whose father was a police chief in India, but wanted his children to have a better life in America, so came here and took a job as a janitor, his mother as a seamstress. Their children were encouraged to go to school for engineering, and Sohail became an electrical engineer, working his way through college. He then went and served on jury duty as an electrical engineer and was so fascinated by the legal system, he asked to speak to the judge after the trial and said, I love the fact that in this country, everyone is equal under the law. And I want to be a bigger part of it. And the judge became his mentor and encouraged him to go to law school at night while he was working during the day to support his family as an electrical engineer. And he did. And he graduated from law school and began to practice law, helping people, many in his background of Indian descent, who didn't have access to the legal system in a free and open way. And he wanted to build in them the same love he had of the American justice system. He's a naturalized citizen who stays here because he loves this country and is as much an American as anybody else. And do you know, when I nominated him for his judgeship, and by the way, as a lawyer, he took an oath to support and uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. And in the post-9/11 world, he was one of the people who, with me as United States Attorney, helped me to build bridges to the Muslim community, to develop sources, to build trust, and to help that community help us keep our country safe. Sohail was a leader in doing that for American law enforcement. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to give up his practice and become a judge, because I thought he would be a great judge and a great example for children all over our state, and a great story. And he said he would. And do you know the first question he was asked when he sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee in New Jersey? With that background, as his introduction in his speech, the first question was, Mr. Mohammed, could you explain what jihad is? Sohail Mohammed knows about as much about jihad as I do, being an Italian, Irish, American kid from Newark, New Jersey. But because he was a Muslim, they felt free to ask Sohail Mohammed about jihad. Sohail Mohammed knows about as much about Sharia law as I do. This is a man who has sworn an oath to be a citizen of this country, has worked, paid his taxes, raised his family, been law-abiding, as a lawyer upheld his oath to uphold the Constitution of our state and country, and as a judge, since he's been confirmed, has been nothing but a model jurist in dealing with the problems that confront him every day in his courtroom. It is ridiculous and insulting that because I nominated Sohail Mohammed, that people somehow think that that means that I'm for Sharia law. It's crap. And it's the only way I can describe it. And I will not ever apologize for making him a judge. In fact, I'm proud of it. His career will serve as a model for other children of his background and other backgrounds to serve in the law. And Sharia law will not come into New Jersey because of Sohail Mohammed. And as long as I'm governor, it won't come into our state for any other reason. And to suggest otherwise is nothing more than internet blog BS.
We got time for one last question, and in the tradition of the other speakers, we'll give you a softball on this one.
I thank them.
Top 5 favorite Bruce Springsteen songs.
Well, okay. Listen, it's like asking me to pick my favorite 3 children when I have 4. You know, it's very difficult. All right, Thunder Road, Born to Run, Adam Raised a Cain, The Rising, and someone held up Jersey Girl. Here's the thing. I can't make Jersey Girl number 5 because he didn't write it. Tom Waits wrote it, and he covered it. I know my stuff, everybody. Don't mess around, okay? Don't mess around, all right? And for me, number 5 would be Sandy, and that's because that was my mom's name. And whenever I hear that song, which is a great old, slow Jersey Shore song that Bruce wrote now amazingly 42 years ago, I think about my mom who passed away 10 years ago this May. And so those are my top 5 Springsteen songs. Thanks for the softball. I hope Bruce isn't insulted by any of my choices. Thank you all for having me today. I appreciate it very much. It was probably about 35 minutes long. I'll just cut it down to like 20 seconds. It was like, you created this problem. We're $2 billion out of balance. I just signed an executive order alone in my office, cutting $2 billion out of the budget you just passed. I fixed your problem. You can thank me later. Have a good day. And I left. And I have to tell you that the reaction to the speech afterwards was fascinating. I left, and I probably should have just done that in the speech. You know, I wasted 34 minutes and 40 seconds, but all right, I should have just done that. But instead, when I left, I heard about the reaction afterwards from the folks in the legislature, especially the Democrats. They were calling me all kinds of names. Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, you know, all those great leaders of the past I admire so much. And so the next day, I was coming into the State House through the back door, coincidentally at the same time as the Senate president, a guy named Steve Sweeney, still the Senate president, Democrat, head of the Iron Workers Local in New Jersey, a shy and retiring guy just like me. We walked into... Thank you very much. Thank you. Very kind. I appreciate it. I want to thank Lou for his introduction and Lou and Judy for their longtime friendship and support to me and to Mary Pat, going back to even well before the days that I was United States Attorney, starting back in 2002. I am happy to be here and look forward to an exchange today between us on the issues that we care so much about, and that I think will help to define both the direction of my state over the next number of years and the direction of our country. One of the things that I appreciated the most about Lou's introduction was in listing the things that he thought I had become known for. He listed strong and decisive action. See, in the end, we all get known and characterized for how we speak. Maybe me more than some others. If you have a particular style, a particular approach to things, people get fascinated with that part of your approach. State treasurer, when they refused to let us do it. They said they were very busy kind of closing things up. I'm sure they were. And I found out pretty quickly, because the second week as governor of New Jersey, the state treasurer came to me and said, we have a significant problem. If we don't cut $2 billion in current fiscal year spending, with 5 months left in the fiscal year, we will not make payroll for the second pay period in March. Now imagine that. New Jersey, which is the second wealthiest state in the union per capita, was not going to be able to make state payroll for the second pay period in March. So I had two choices. I had then and have now a Democratic legislature. And choice number one was to go down, sit with the leaders of the legislature, and try to negotiate with them a package that would bring balance to the current fiscal year budget. The second choice that was presented to me was that I could sit down, make the cuts in the budget, and because of the special constitutional powers that New Jersey's Constitution bestows upon the governor, that I could do that by executive order. Now, for those of you who have gotten to know me over the last 5 years, if you think I picked choice one, you need to leave now. You need to go. You can't keep up here with this conversation. I obviously picked number two. So I sat down and for 2 weeks went through with the state treasurer and members of my senior staff, line by line, every line in the budget. And we cut $2 billion with 5 months to go. Put it in an executive order, and then asked the legislature for the opportunity to give a joint session speech on the fiscal situation in the state. They said yes, and when I went to go to give the speech, they said, when do we get the advanced copy of the speech? And I said, you'll hear the speech when I give it. And they said, no, the tradition here is that we get an advanced copy of the speech. I said, I know, so you can leak it. And I would prefer to actually be the one who delivers my message rather than you. So I went out there without giving them any preview. And basically, the speech, and that's fine. That's part of how you define someone. But for people in government and people who are intent on providing leadership to a state or to our country, it's strong and decisive action, or the lack thereof, that does define, ultimately, who you are and what kind of leader you are. And let me tell a few stories off the top to exemplify that. When I first became governor of New Jersey in January of 2010, I was told during the transition by my predecessor, John Corzine, that I usually pause for the laughter then, but I'm sorry. I just flew in here this morning and I'm off my game, so I apologize. We'll do it again, because I know you'll do it again too. I was told by my predecessor, John Corzine, that the budget was balanced in the fiscal year that I was entering, and that I didn't need to worry about anything. I became a little suspicious in the week before my inauguration when we asked to come in and just examine the books for ourselves with my new